this meeting, RASA, or the Royal, you like that? The Radio Amateur Society of Australia representatives, Chris VK3QB and Ian VK3BUF have kindly come along to talk about what they offer to the amateur radio fraternity. I guess it's important to note that the society is really about providing an evidence-based, and I'll read this because it's important we get it absolutely right, an evidence-based research and strategic direction of issues, or for issues related to amateur radio, to find third parties involved in the administration, management and regulation of the hobby, to promote amateur radio and its role in facilitating emerging communication techniques, to educate and encourage the next generation of radio amateurs, and to lobby the regulator in order to protect the privileges of the Australian radio amateurs. So it's not here to oppose the WIA, but really, I think I'll let them explain, but really to complement. So I'd like you to welcome Chris and Ian. Now we'll let them talk for their period of time, which might be 30 or 45 minutes. And then we'll have a short question and answer session for 15 minutes after, and I reserve the right to keep it to that. Otherwise we could still be here when it's way past our bedtimes.
No, we
won't. Sorry, Bob?
No, we won't.
So I'd ask you to welcome Chris and Ian to join us this evening. Welcome, Chris and Ian.
Well, good evening all. There's a few familiar faces here. I've seen around the traps. There's a lot that I haven't met before, but I'm Ian Jackson, VK3BUF. I'm from out at Druin West, and I think I've seen a few of your faces out at the Antenna Palooza events that we've had for the last couple of years. And my co-presenter is, of course, Chris. Want to thank the EMDRC for having us here tonight, and well, after that wonderful introduction, I can put a line through a couple of our slides.
What, the royal bit?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But no, it's good to be able to get out and talk to some of the groups, and it's definitely a two-way street. It's nice to hear what people are thinking and what they see as being the future of amateur radio. You can press F5 on that if you can. Click up.
It was there.
There it is. We're in here.
That's it.
Good. And here's some of the information that Dave's already given us, but who we are. Our objectives, well, I want to be able to list our objectives, and I'll go through that in a moment. We want to be able to discuss our some of the current issues on amateur radio. Exams and licensing has been a very topical subject. And QRM issues, something that affects probably most of us at some point in time, is interference and what we can do about it. And that's something that is very high profile with the RASA organisation. There have been some changes to the amateur band plans, we'll discuss some of that, and some proposals to contest call signs as well. RASA was formed by 5 amateurs spread around Australia in 4 states, and this is sliding around a little bit. There we go. We were formed officially about a year ago, but in 2007 we were listening to what was happening in amateur radio circles. The WIA was certainly the peak representative body for Australia at that time, and that's fine. There's going to be a lot of WIA members in the room here today, and they're enjoying the organisation, and I've got absolutely nothing against that, and I hope that they continue to enjoy the WIA. What we're doing here is we're providing a different style of representation to our regulator, and letting people who follow that style to come and follow us on that journey. So there was some concern about the level of representation. There was some concerns about how examinations had been operating, and this is there was a collection of reasons, and that started the process of us saying, okay, let's do this. Let's form another national body. Our structure is very simple. We're a creature of the internet, certainly, and we keep our members up to date with bulletins every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what's happening. And we also launched a website, which is a great resource with a lot of information about amateur radio. I had a glass of water here. So, RASA is an incorporated association in the state of Victoria. It's also registered as a national body through ATSIC, so we are able to function in all states of Australia. That is an important point of difference because it creates a fairly simple institution in terms of requirements. It's not like we're a public company, but we have a management team, a committee which follows all the normal safeguards of incorporated associations. And we will be conducting elections for that management team every October. The first one will be in October of this year. There is a few safeguards that were built into that to make sure that over time we don't become stale in the roles of the management of RASA. So there's a limited tenure for all the office positions, and over time that would allow us to bring more people in and give some people a rest. I think that's an important feature of any organisation, whether it's a football club, an amateur radio club, or even a larger organisation. It's nice to see a bit of a turnover of people running the show. It introduces new ideas. The organisation was free to join for the first year, and as of the beginning of this year, we've been seeking $80 a member per year for membership. And the details for that, we'll come back to that, but that's on our website. That's sufficient for our needs. The overheads are not huge. We've got well over 500 members at the moment, and that's growing daily. We've got a fairly good working relationship with, that water, I don't know what's in it. We've got a working relationship with the ACMA, and we've met with them on a few occasions and stay in contact on specific issues. And that's an ongoing process, depending on what they're doing and depending on what we're doing. But they are listening to us, and they're treating us as a serious source of information and interaction with the amateur radio fraternity. So the founders of our group and our present management team is Glenn, VK4DU, Alan, VK2CO, whom you might remember operates the VK Ham website. That keeps him quite busy too. Chris, VK3QB, Andrew is VK6AS, and myself. Between our group, there's a lot of experience in many different fields, in government, organisations, in technology and business, and in the amateur radio side of things, a lot of experience with the examination processes and interaction with radio clubs. Some of these objectives were already mentioned, but yes, we want to promote amateur radio and emerging technology. We want to provide information on research that's happening to advance the hobby, and look at the strategic directions of the hobby. It's been around for a long time. We're a little bit in uncharted waters with how this is going to go in the future, with the use of new technology and the implementation of smartphones. The whole dynamic of what people want is changing a little bit, and we're going to have to come up with, we're going to have to meet these challenges. So we also need to educate the next generation of amateurs to bring them up to speed on what had happened before and what's in store for the future, and that's the only way we're going to get people back into the hobby. And of course, we want to continue to lobby our regulator to protect our privileges as amateur operators. That's also very important. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of organisations out there who have their eye on our spectrum space, and the only way we can stay on top of that is to act as a group and to lobby the government and say that this is the voice of a lot of people saying this is how we want to have it, and what we want to continue to do. Our priorities, there we go. Our priorities for the remainder of this year and next year, we're going to be focused on the upcoming ACMA syllabus review. That's a very important part of how amateur radio is going to be looking. I don't know quite what that's going to look like, and there's going to be it's going to be a very big process. We'll be looking at providing submissions to that review board, but I don't know quite how that will be taken because there's a lot of information to deal with. But a little bit more about that later. There's the 60-metre band. That's part of the spectrum that had notionally been allocated to us in our part of the world some time ago. We only needed the ACMA to say, okay, go ahead, these are the band limits, start using it. That hasn't happened. It's a complicated one. I know that the WIA had also been trying to push them along on this. We've been trying to push them along on this. They have said that they've been very busy with the change of the exam processes and internal structural changes, and it's really hard to get them to put resources into amateur radio. But we're going to continue to nag them to try and get this up and running. There's a lot of people waiting for it. We want to examine the present limits of amateur power levels. We know that there was a trial done for higher power levels, and that was a little bit of a strange trial. I think the outcome was quite inconclusive. We haven't put that to bed. We would still like to see it happen in the future. But obviously there've got to be controls, and people have to be aware of the repercussions of running high power, but that's another story. Once again, it's a matter of interacting between what the amateurs want and what the ACMA is prepared to let us do. Foundation licensees have been with us for a while, and we would like to see the foundation operators have some access to digital modes. Once again, this is a consultative process, and this has been a contentious thing for a while. I believe that the original concept of saying no to digital for foundation operators was digital at that time was a very distinct thing. It was packet radio, it was quite technical. But one of the unintended consequences of that is that now we have a lot of repeaters around the country which are both analogue and digital. Foundation licensees can talk into them in their analogue mode but can't talk into them into their digital mode, even though it's a voice coming out of the speaker at the other end. And that's locking a lot of foundation operators out. And in some cases it makes it hard in a club where you've got a repeater that only some of the members can share in. So we would like to see that being examined. Of course, we had some changes to the provision of our examination services. The contract that the WIA had been operating for examination services and had been running for many years expired in February of this year, and that was very much a known target when the contract had to be renewed by them or by someone else. Last October, the ACMA launched a tender process for them to decide who was going to be taking over those services, and the services are the organisation, the operating of the exams, and the distribution of the licences that come out of those exams. That was run through their normal tender processes, and at the other side of it, they made a call and decided to award it to the Australian Maritime College, which operates under the umbrella of the University of Tasmania, and that was announced in February. So from then, it was kind of game on. The AMC, the Australian Maritime College, had a very limited time to go ahead and get all of that together. They had to make contact with the network of assessors presently around Australia associated with clubs and invite them to be part of the new network of assessors, and a good many of them have come on board. I think it's 80 plus, I haven't seen the final figures, but there's something like that number on the AMC website. They had to create several new processes so that they knew how to deal with the standard exams, the foundations, the upgrades, and the advanced licenses, and to deal with special exams, and to deal with exams in remote locations. So there's a lot of processes involved there. They had to create a question bank, and they have done that and they're up and running. So their services started in February 25, and their first certificates of proficiency were issued a month later. Part of the tender requirement by the ACMA was that the successful tenderer had to utilise some advisors who knew what was involved with amateur radio and the licensing and the examination services. And at that point, we had 2 advisors volunteered their services. They were on the, I would say they're not were, they still are on the RASA management team, but quite independent of that, Glenn Dunstan and Andrew Smith volunteered to assist the AMC as advisors. That has been a fairly successful process, as I understand, but what they do when they're working with the AMC is quite a separate thing to what we do with RASA. There'll be a little bit more about that. Since the implementation of the exam, since they're up and running, I understand that the AMC have additional advisors. I don't know who they are. I don't know that they released that information, but I only know that they do have a couple of other helpers in the pool. What this meant, straight up, there was many improvements to the way the services operated. There's the process of conducting an exam, as it was quite convoluted. There was quite a lot of paperwork involved on the day of the exam, and the red tape associated with an exam event was about the same as the time it took to sit the exam itself. And that was all a little bit unfortunate, and a little bit at odds from what I can gather to how the AMC had been carrying out maritime exams for quite some time. So the new processes are still secure, but they are simplified, and I think the assessors will find that to be a bit of a benefit. The other item which affected some assessors, obviously not all, was that it was a requirement for assessors to be WIA members in order to be assessors. And there were some assessors who fell off the role because they didn't particularly want to stay with the WIA, and I believe that some of those will probably come back. The other thing that is a big change is that the AMC allows single assessors, so that when the examination process is just an exam for theory, they can do it with a single member. And this was another issue that had been a problem, particularly in rural areas where it had been difficult to get a couple of assessors in some of the country towns at the stage events. It's slowed processes down. So I have spoken to a couple of guys who are remaining as assessors, and now they're keen to be able to continue with these assessments without having to head into a capital and team up with others. So, what we'll do as RASA will be, I think didn't miss anything there, did I? Oh, we're good. Yeah, we're going to be monitoring new developments with the AMC when information is released by them, and that happens from time to time about changes that they're making, and I think it will be a dynamic process over the next year. We will probably see changes as they slowly get the performance of their systems into high gear. So we'll monitor that and we'll report to our members when it happens. We do want to lobby the AMC for a couple of changes already. We would like to see concessions for retirees and concession card holders and for students. That's something, it should probably have been implemented from day one, and that's something that we are lobbying to see happen. When the syllabus review comes up, that's going to be an interesting process. The syllabus review panel is part of what the ACMA are scheduling. I haven't seen any dates when that's going to happen. The successful tenderer hosts it. The successful tenderer chooses a number of panel members, and then they spend some time thrashing out what the syllabus ought to look like into the future. Okay, well that's about as far as I want to take these topics. Chris is going to take over now, and he's going to be talking about some of our other initiatives, and that relates to dealing with interference and topics such as that.
Cool. Thank you, Ian. And good evening, everyone. As Ian said, I see quite a few familiar faces and some new faces. I'm Chris, VK3QB. Following on from Ian's part of the talk, I'm happy to take a few questions as we go, but if it is going to get dug down, I'll ask you to defer questions until the end. Right, where's this guy? All right, one of the things that came through quite loud and clear when we first started, and in fact going back long before RASA was even thought of, as many of you will be aware, is noise in the HF spectrum. Is there anyone who's on HF who doesn't have noise problems from neighbours' TVs, LED lights, garage door openers? Yeah, I think everyone can relate to that. And it was one of the things that everyone sort of said, well, no one's doing anything with this. What can we do? Representation generally was quite poor. The regulator, as we all know, is perhaps like a lot of Australian regulators, isn't regulating as much as we'd like it to. Complaints go unanswered. The actions of importers go without any follow-up, and we're seeing lots and lots of RF noisy equipment come into the country, and it's ruining the HF bands for a lot of us, especially those who live in built-up areas.
Oh, essentially it's mostly plasma TVs that cause most of the...
Yeah, but look, there's power line noise, there's all sorts of noise, So one of the things we sort of did, oh, it's over here, right. Guys, could you fire up that YouTube for me? Thanks, Andrew. Most of you can probably relate to something like this.
It's a noise.
Hopefully it's going to be loud. Yep. Got a familiar noise, Brendan?
Yeah, it's not that strong.
That's power line noise for Alan VK2CA. Thanks. Just flip back to where we were.
Go to here.
It's not going to get something. Thank you. All right, I'm a bit aware of the time, so I won't ask you what experience you've had with noise, but yes, there's plasma TVs from the neighbour, there's LED lights in your own home, there's switch mode power supplies, regulators and all sorts of stuff for hot water services. The list goes on. Solar panels, power line noise. And as I think we can all probably agree, the regulator isn't going to do anything proactive. So we started to think, what can we do? Clearly there's no golden bullet. No one is going to step in and help us. Perhaps it's something we need to do ourselves. Most of us have a level of technical knowledge, and a large part of the hobby is technically based and experimentation based. So why don't we try and do something to help fix the problem ourselves? we sat down probably nearly a year ago now and said, well, what can we do? What's going to be most useful? And we thought, well, we don't have all the answers. There's not that many of us. I'm one of the fortunate ones living in the country. I don't have any noise problems. I turn on 40 metres at any time of the day or night and the needle's barely moving. What is it that we could do that could be useful? Well, there is a plethora of amateurs out there, some will be here, who are dealing with these problems day to day. There's many who want to deal with them, and there will be some who have dealt with their noises. So we thought, what if we can create a platform and create a system that enables people to contribute in an organised fashion? We can reflect that back out to the community, so you can either use it to try to solve your problems, but hopefully, as importantly, you can contribute to the solution and share it with others. So we did a little bit of research as to what we thought would be the best sort of mechanism, and we came up with a knowledge base. It's very much the starting point, and we're hoping that everyone will contribute to it and it will develop. We're providing the platform, and we're hoping that all of you will contribute to it. Special thanks to Bob, who's been a part of the core team since day one, helping to get the base into place, the foundations, and Ian as well. A lot of hours and a lot of very, very interesting discussions in how we wanted to put this together. Just a few comments so that I don't lose track of the important stuff. It's based on a knowledge-based system, which is really designed to allow us to order the information, bring it into a single database, categorise it, and make it available in an order that makes sense to the user. And it's hopefully easy to find things, and it's also easy to add things. As I mentioned earlier, we're really hopeful that everyone's going to use this as a resource that they can use, but also that they can contribute to. And one of the other things that I would hope you all agree with as well is that clubs form the grassroots of our hobby. When people come and join our hobby, they do it at the club level. When they want help with projects or problems, most of us go to other club members. So we're really hopeful that all the clubs will get on board with this as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. All right, there's not too much more I wanted to say about that now. Could we flick over to the website? Right, this is a live demonstration, so I apologise if things don't go to plan. QRM Guru, we've kept it very, very simple, and we've built it on a knowledge-based system platform. This is the home screen, fairly straightforward, qrm.guru, very simple menu structure. The bulk of the content is down here in the categories. Can I use that or not?
Yeah, it should work.
Oh, good. All right. Here on the left-hand side of the window, we've got the various categories that we've used to try to drop various information and files and videos into. So there's things like basic diagnosis, start here, where do I get started? There's some case studies, and we're hoping that's a section that will grow exponentially as people share their information with us, and I'll share a couple of those with you. Information on consumer devices. The old chestnut, of course, it doesn't matter how technically capable you are, if you're not getting along with your neighbours, they're not going to want to deal with or want to help you dealing with noise coming out of their plasma TV, LED lights, whatever it might be. So some information there on helping to hopefully pave the way to a better relationship with neighbours so that they want to help you solve the noise. Obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff on locating the noise source. How do I find it? That's a placeholder for now. We want to get some information in there on mobile noise, and Bob will be helping us with that a lot. Noise reduction in your shack. The old chestnut, clean up your laundry first before going out and sorting out problems around the place. Power line noise seems to be far more common than we thought, but feedback certainly indicates that there's a lot of people suffering Power line noise. We've got some information on regulations, and again, we're hoping to grow this. We've got to be a little bit, I suppose, careful and balanced about what we put in a public resource about dealing with the regulator. But if we can help with some information on when it's appropriate to lodge a complaint with ACMA, if you're going to do it, here's the sort of information you want to be providing. You don't sort of want to become a vexatious complainant banging on their door every week. They're certainly not going to help you. This is something I'll get Ian to talk about at the end of this section, an RF interference product review. Another chestnut for a lot of people is noise coming out of solar panels and inverters and all that sort of stuff. G'day, Tony. And then hopefully, all importantly, once we've located the noise, we've narrowed it down, we've got all the evidence to help us clarify that yes, it is that plasma TV, it's the garden lights in the neighbour's place, it's that power line over there with the power line number ABC123. How am I going to resolve it? Moving down a bit further, some templates and forms. Probably nothing particularly new in there, but it's always easier to start with a form than have to create one yourself. And a little bit of something, probably not such an issue these days since we've all gone predominantly to internet TV and digital TV. It's been many years since I've caused any interference to my neighbours, but in the event that you are, just some log sheets to help there. That's sort of the starting point for how we thought we'd lay out the knowledge base. And certainly if it looks like we need more categories, we'll do that, but it's a starting point. Those of you that you've used any sort of online help desk or knowledge base before, over here on this side we've got the latest documents that have been added or posts and those that are trending, so those that have been getting the most hits, if you like. All right, so just a start here, a simple page that just provides a quick overview of what the website's about, what it's intended to do and not do. And what we're hoping down here is that, ultimately, there'll be hopefully dozens, if not hundreds of people that have contributed to this resource. One of the things that even dealing with power line companies, we've found it's different depending what state you're in and who your distributor is. So it would be really, really useful to be able to build up a little bit of a database so you can say, rightio, I live in this part of the country, my power distributor is X, Y and Z, what's the best way to deal with them? For example, with Alan, he just found that really the best way to get an outcome was to go to the Ombudsman and start there. Whereas some of the other power distributors are a little bit more responsive if you go to them directly. Right, there's a fair bit of stuff in here. I'm not going to spend too much time going into each individual section or page. I'll just go over a few that give a bit of an indication as to how you could use it. Firstly, and perhaps one of the things that is quite powerful, I think, with the knowledge base, is that you could type in, please Andrew, noise in my shack. And straight away you can see here, it's going to go on, you spell it, there you go. It's starting to find all the documents, all of the posts that contain relevant information about noise in your shack. If we maybe try plasma TV. And let's click on the MFJ noise cancelling signal enhancer. This is a case study that was sent to us by Craig through MET. I don't think Craig's here, is he? Nope. Craig came along to the EMDRC Hamfest and had a good chat with us there, and he offered to send this in. Could I get you to go down and just click on the... We won't look at the whole thing, it's about 4 or 5 minutes. But just to give you an idea of the sort of information that we're hoping to bring in here that people can then look at and use. So if you've got what you've identified as a noisy plasma
This is
TV...
VK3MET. I was recently asked to do a video for RASA on interference, and on a little device MFJ have made called a noise cancelling signal enhancer, something that I bought a while ago due to some plasma TV noise. I'm just using a TS830S, I think this little puppy is. Any radio can be affected by this.
S9
It's a plasma TV in the neighbourhood. I know where it is, but I would have no way of listening to HF otherwise.
I'm just aware of the
Just
time.
to turn up.
We won't go through it. There's probably already about, I don't know, if I said in the order of 10 to 15 videos on various elements of dealing with noise. Yeah, back to the website next. But that's one example. There's another one there of Alan with his power line noise, and we're hoping that we'll get more and more case studies. So I could just as easily type in power line noise, LED noise, dealing with ACMA, and the engine sitting behind this website will go and find the most relevant results and present you with those. Of course, the other way to use this resource instead is just to start browsing it, go and click on things. So I could say, well, what's the process? The process is a very, very simple sort of start here and work your way through, rightio, I've got noise, where do I start? So a basic diagnosis. Is it in my own backyard or is it somewhere outside of my house? I'll have to start here, let's go back one. So an article on basic diagnosis and some information there just to help get you started, get you looking in the right direction. Go back there. All right, one that's particularly useful I think is the building a direction finding loop. So you've turned off all your power, you've run your radio on a battery and everything, the noise is still there, so it's not in your house, it's outside somewhere. What's your starting point for finding it? Won't go into all that information other than just a very quick 30 seconds. This is something Ian put together. Ian put together a series of videos on really from the beginning to the end of finding noise.
Before we can track down any noise source, we need to prepare the tools that will help us. One of the key tools to have for tracking down interference is a simple coax loop antenna connected to a portable receiver. Over the next 5 minutes, we'll be showing how to build one of these antennas from basic parts. We need a short section of RG8 or RG213 coax, a couple of PL259 plugs, a T-piece adapter, some heat shrink tubing, and a few hand tools to put it all together. We need 900 millimeters of this cable, marked off in two 450 millimeter sections. Sheath.
So here we've got a double, Ian working really, really fast.
Now we can bunch
Showing
the
you how
braid
to
back
make
onto itself
a very,
and
very
back the
simple
excess
TF
braid.
loop.
This leaves the end of the center core exposed. A non-resonant balanced loop that will produce a decisive null in the interference signal when it is held 90 degrees to the noise source. For best results, the receiver should allow the operator to listen to the bottom half of the HF band using an AM receive mode. Somewhere around 10 megahertz is usually fine.
All right, I'm not going to, can we just go back to the, thanks. All right, so I just wanted to go through a few features in QRM.guru, how you can use it, give you an indication of the sort of information that's in there. There's forms, there's videos. It's not overly technical. It really is, the idea is for it to be a practical site for people to get their hands around and really for clubs to get involved in. Make it a club project. Right, what do I want to talk about next? Yeah, so really encourage everyone to go home and over the course of the next days and weeks, spend some time having a look. If you find any broken links or spelling errors, please send us an email. We went over to Perth Tech, when was that, beginning of March, and they spent a week or two over there going through it and helping us just with all of those sorts of, I suppose, the first round of editorial, fixing up typos, spelling mistakes, links that were broken, orphaned links, that sort of stuff. It is by no means a complete resource. I think, and I hope it'll always be work in progress. One of the other things that, again, coming back to the concept of making it a tool to get people active and participating, was sort of, well, where do I start with the equipment that I need? So again, you know, a nice corny little name, a QRM kill kit was the idea. So if you type in kill, there we go, second one down. We've sort of put together just the basics of what you might have in this, call it a toolkit, assuming that either you or your club is going to have a basic receiver, and probably someone will have a mobile phone which will give you the ability to photograph things, record things, stuff like that. But as far as all the other stuff is concerned, what would you need? There's a bit of a list there. There's one there. We've put these together. There's one there with all the stuff in it. And as an example, there's the material to make the DF loop. So it's all there, it's ready to go, both as either an individual or club project, but then hopefully for a club to get involved to help someone who might be having some noise issues. Right, I think unless there's any specific questions now, we can take any other questions at the end. Yeah, mate?
Yeah, I'm curious, with RASA, this is obviously QRM part, but as far as supporting hams that might be having interference problems, what can RASA do?
Look, I think the best thing is to encourage the clubs to get involved, to help members or help people who are nearby. You know, we don't have the resources, and obviously amateurs are spread out all over the country as well.
What about the case where they're having issues with the power company and them referring it to someone else and
Yeah.
more difficult, less technical types?
This sort of stuff, we've had some, what I want to call them, spitballing sessions, where we've said, look, if, let's say there are 10 or 15 amateurs that contact us and they're all having the same problem with power company XYZ. So long as there is adequate evidentiary support of both the issue and the fact that the individuals made an attempt to resolve it, we didn't see a reason why perhaps we couldn't get involved on behalf of 10 or 15 people and maybe either go and represent those 10 or 15 people either to the power company or to ACMA, but that's very much spitballing it. The same thing goes with things like noisy solar panels. I don't know where it'll go, Brendan, but that's a possibility. Drew?
You can bet that 10 years ago in 2009, when we had that disastrous bushfire, the main cause was from a power line fault. You can bet that before that fell and before that became totally dangerous, it was kicking up a hell of a racket on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, the power companies have not been made to realise that a significant number of power line interference problems could well be the precursor for something like that happening again, and they should be made to take interference complaints seriously, because that could save them a lot of money and it could save lives.
Yeah. Look, it's a good point. And look, it's something that we only touched on briefly, but you know, maybe that's a possibility that we could have a front end where we collect data, a little bit like an intruder watch service, only call it a power line watch service. As I say, none of this stuff has been discussed formally in our team. But
well, I just wanted to make the comment that elsewhere on the website we've got videos about various events, including tracking down power line noise, the procedures and what to expect. And as you mentioned, yeah, they're an ignition source as well as being an RF noise source. And there's even some examples in there of how infrared imaging on power lines and poles can be a precursor to sources of interference. Items are heating up because they're arcing over at critical locations.
Well, the power companies, if your society can do it, they should be made to realise that they've got a volunteer fault spotting network over the whole area. and they should make use of it. They should be made to understand that that's probably a valuable resource for spotting a fault before it becomes a disaster.
That's a good suggestion. Let's take that on board and we'll take it out to the clubs, and if there's enough interest, we could look at facilitating some sort of focal point.
Very good point.
Noel?
My personal experience with my local energy provider, United Energy, has only been fairly positive in that I've been able to provide poll numbers and so on, and the feedback that I got from them is that they regard any leakage in the system as loss of revenue to them, and they've been quite proactive in my area in going out, cleaning insulators and tightening up connectors and all sorts of stuff. So,
yeah. Well, look, it seems to be a mixed bag.
It probably varies area to area, and you have to approach that individually.
Yeah.
So what's the best?
One of the correspondents said that his power company actually redistributed the technician so that there wasn't someone available to go out and keep trying to address his problem, because no sooner as they fixed one power pole, there was the less noisy one that he told them about, but they hadn't bothered getting to it. So yeah, good points. I'll just push on. Right, I'll pass it back to Ian to talk a little bit about what he has been doing with an old microwave oven.
Oh, this is one of the other initiatives. One of the problems are that there's an awful lot of products out there. A lot of them come from China and from all over the world. Some of them create interference, some don't. Some have got CE approvals stamped on them, and some of them are fake CE approvals. So I started out from the position of, okay, let's start to profile products that are clean and dirty, basically, and it would be nice to make a naughty and nice list of ones that we've had some testimonials on. And LED lighting is a classic case. So I wanted a test chamber for that, and what I did, I got an old Philips microwave oven, nice big one, and gutted it. Had nice ferrites around the door. I put a power outlet in there, and then I started putting a couple of different light appliances in there and checking the profile. And what you can see on that is the spectrum analyzer with the one on the left, I think, is a Philips lamp from the supermarket, which is nice and clean, and another one, a downlight, which I think wiped out everything up to about 15 megahertz. And there's a lot of differences. So there's a one sheet profile of various devices, and we're adding to it. That was put in the microwave. There is no microwave oven in there, I gutted it, so it's not going to cook anything. And that little chart that was next to it, that little graph, which just disappeared, it shows its effect on the different ammeter bands. So we've taken all the ammeter bands up to 2 meters and said, okay, what is the relative effect on those bands, so that we get a kind of a curve of what's happening. That was a J-car model driving light. I stuck a couple of those on my L300, and whenever I turn them on, it wipes out 2 meters. There's a nice fat birdie sitting in the middle of about 150 meg or thereabouts. And you can see on the chart below, it's got with the purple line, it's actually quite quiet on most of the bands, but on 2 meters it rings the bell. So we're profiling different objects and giving a relative indicator as to how it affects amateur radio. It's not a NATA test lab, it's a relative indicator of whether something is good or bad. And hopefully we will build up a bit of a library of things that you might say, okay, well, I will go to the supermarket and buy Philips lights instead of these other ones because they're proven to be quiet. I mean, we operate in a vacuum and we don't quite know what to buy.
And we found the same with solar inverters. I've got a Fronius, and that's completely quiet across the spectrum. But Graham had can you remember what it was?
Oh, no, I can't.
Doesn't matter. But it was quiet up to 50 megs, and it had spikes right through 50 megs. So once again, we want feedback from the amateur community who have got solar panels on both the good and the bad. So, you know, we've had quite a few people write to us to say Sunny Boy's good, Fronius is good, and there's one other that I just can't quite remember the name of now. But hopefully, in the coming months, we'll be able to have a listing of these. And of course, for legal reasons, we have to have your independent results may vary. But I think it helps to give us all a sense of, as Ian said, a level of goodness and badness. Was there much more?
This is worthwhile just mentioning about the Clean Energy Council of Australia have a list of compliant equipment on their website. So
Yep.
that might be worth having a look at as well.
There's a link on the solar panel website. And the other thing, of course, is, you know, part of our hobby is always to be learning and educational. So we're hoping that this resource can expand and become an educational resource. Perhaps it'll be great for club projects. Great to get out there as a club and help someone who's dealing with noise. And of course, as I've said, we want your feedback. If you find errors on the site, links that don't work, or if you've had an experience, shoot us through an email that's listed there. And then, you know, hopefully it'll become a resource that's beneficial for everyone. There's the kit. Is it time to talk about the kit yet? I don't know.
Well, we'll just get through these last
Yeah.
items.
Right,
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Me? All right. One of the other things that came up, again, those of us who are on HF are very well aware of some of the clashes between the newfound FT8 mode and the rest of us. And in particular 160 and 40 metres. There's been a lot of chatter about this, and if you listen on HF you'll hear some of the chatter, and of course there's also been chatter on Facebook and various other forums that really we've got lots and lots of spectrum down in HF, and there's enough to share it and there's enough to go round. So on that basis, late in 2018, we collaborated with the WIA and undertook a band plan review. We went out via email, we got lots of feedback. And look, the long and short of it was there's enough space on 160 and 40 metres to give those digital modes a little bit more real estate. It wasn't going to impact on the CW operators or the sideband operators. And as we all know, the band plans are very much what's been called traditionally a gentleman's agreement. Really a mechanism to help us use the resources or the bands more harmoniously and recognise that, well, if I'm going to do FT8, I'm doing it here. If I'm going to do sideband, I'm doing it here. There are some spot frequencies for things like QRP work, AM work, etc. But let's see if we can resolve the band plan specifications, particularly around those two hotspots on 160 and on 40. Right, so what came out of that was a couple of changes, and at the same time, I don't know, maybe it was the third quarter of last year, there was a lot of talk as well around just a single page band plan, something I could stick up on the wall and quickly reference as I was moving around. We've put this together. We've got about 20 or 30. Anyone that doesn't have one's welcome to grab one. It's just a very, very simple one-pager. It doesn't cover all the bands, 160 through to 10, particularly highlighting the FT8 frequencies. Those of us that don't use FT8 probably, you know, on occasion have tripped over them, either put out a CQ or had our regular sked. And, you know, on occasion you'll even hear people saying, there's a horrible noise underneath your signal, but if we press on, I'm sure we'll be fine. So, you know, that can be just a useful little reminder when we're on the HF bands. The changes were on 160 metres, just a slight adjustment to, off the top of my head, around 1840 for digital, and 40 metres, a very small change there to move digital, or to have digital from about 7074 to 7080 off the top of my head. So it just allows that little bit of a segment there for digital. Another one that's come up just recently that we're going to hopefully get a consultation process going. And incidentally, WIA signed off on all that stuff. We did it collaboratively, and it was jointly agreed. So that was a good thing. The next one to look at, I think, would be this little crossover we've got here on 30 metres, where there's about 2, 3, 4 kilohertz from memory, where SSB crosses over with digital as well. And I think we're probably about the only country in the world that has SSB on 30 anyway. But it would be nice to have that crossover resolved, because once again, anyone that's active on 30 has probably heard people having their nets on 10.130, thereabouts, 10.135, and sort of encouraging one another to push on through that annoying digital noise that's underneath. Any questions on any of that stuff? Oh, there they are. There's the changes. And also just a reminder that digital segment on 80 is 3570 to 3.6, so please either go below or above. Any questions on the band plan stuff?
I've just got one. I know it's been an ongoing thing, people are asking for more power. And on the digital modes, obviously, people are using more power here and there. What about harmonisation of the modes as far as power goes to the current level? So everything can be 400 watts, for example.
Sorry, say again?
So we could use high power on everything up to 400 watts, not just sideband.
Yeah.
Is that
Look, it's
something to look
it's something we're certainly putting some proposals together to ACMA on.
Yeah.
Not only that, but also up to a kilowatt for HF.
Yeah. Because that one hasn't been very successful to date.
Not to date.
But at least harmonisation might be a...
Yeah, the trouble with some of the harmonisation stuff, if you look at the DX window in 80 metres, for example, if we go up into the area between about 3.8 and 3.9, there's pretty close to 400 commercial allocations there. Now, they're not going to move. Who's going to pay for police, CFA, defence, a myriad of commercial organisations to retune their antennas, move all their frequencies? They're operating lawfully on frequencies that were granted to them by the ACMA. So I think when it comes to harmonisation with other regions, for example, we've got to be pragmatic about what's already in place in VK.
I was referring to harmonisation of the power levels for the carriers and that.
Yeah.
Come up to recognised level.
Similar sort of issue from the perspective at least of communicating with ACMA. Yeah. And it's something that's on our agenda. Hillary?
With FT4 now being the flavour of the day, virtually, what provisions do you consider for that in the digital section?
I haven't even thought about it, but I mean,
it is new. So
yeah, you know, there's
The T10s have been developed too.
yeah. I mean, it's one of the problems we've got, I suppose, is some of this stuff is developed in America, and they make decisions about where their spot frequencies are going to go based on the American band plan. Most of them, correct me if I'm wrong, is also legislated, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sure. I know.
No, but American allocations that
Yes,
they can
they are.
use, unlike us, is legislated.
Correct.
So you've got this licence class, you can only use sideband in this section of the band. Whereas for Australians, you could use sideband wherever you want legally, but because of the band plan, we sort of slice the bands up. Anything else on where we've gone well over time? No? The other resource we've put out there, and again, this came from feedback, a single website to go just to find out special interest frequencies and spot frequencies. All of these would be or should be compliant with the band plan, but it just gives you a bit of an insight into if you wanted to listen on Whisper, FT8, CW, PSK31, these are the spot frequencies to go to. That's vkfrequencies.info. Right, what else? The other one, this sort of again came up last year, and I suppose for contesters and DXs it's been a sort of a dream for some. You know, your core contester, what does he or she want? A 2x1 call sign, a kilowatt, and an access to every band that everyone else has got. So we thought, well, look, let's see what the amateur community want, and we went out there fourth quarter last year, and there was very, very positive feedback that a 2x1 contest call sign would be a good thing. So on that basis, we put together a subcommittee called for interested parties. And that subcommittee started its deliberations, I think it was mid-February, somewhere around mid to late February. And the sorts of things that both the amateurs said needed to be thought about were things like, should 2x1 call signs be available only to clubs or to individuals? Should they only be for contests, or should they be for other activities like IOTA and D-expeditions? What would be the eligibility requirements? Should I have to have been a gun contester coming in the top 3 places for all the worldwide contests in the last year? Or should it be open and have a somewhat egalitarian eligibility criteria so that everyone could have a stab at it if they were interested? It's certainly been an interesting process, and we're expecting a recommendation to come out of the subcommittee hopefully in the next month or so.
Chris, what have you been told about those 2x1 call signs?
When, I think it was the 4th of December, had the discussion with ACMA, they said they were largely happy to go with the sector.
But a lot of it historically owned by experimenters.
That's right. The proposal would most likely quarantine anything that's already assigned to an experimenter. And in terms of the total population of those call signs, there aren't many. I think, looked up, there might have been half a dozen tops in VK3, maybe 2 in VK6.
One, VK.
One, there you go. So those would be quarantined, and the rest of them would be, if this proposal goes through, would be quarantined for example, as contest call signs. Right, so just about finishing up. That's our website. That's the place to go just to learn a little bit more about us and who we are and what we're doing and how to contact us. We've been through qrm.guru, and that's the one that I really hope that everyone would spend some time and give us feedback. And if you've had your own experience resolving noise, let us know about it. As Ian mentioned, we send out a bulletin typically every 2 to 4 weeks. If there's something particularly notable, we will send out an interim bulletin. And we really welcome feedback both on the format of the bulletin and the content. So if you've got something you'd like to see in our bulletin, please send it to us. And as Ian mentioned, membership's $8 a year. It doesn't sound like much. And it really just helps us cover what is essentially the cost of running a virtual organisation. We don't have any real estate, we don't have any real resources that cost a lot of money. We've just got internet-based costs that we need to cover. And of course the administration associated with dealing with ASIC and consumer affairs. Right, I think that covers it, so we're happy to take any other questions. Oh yes, sorry. We spoke about the QRM kit. We've pulled these together and it's got all the stuff that we'd sort of mentioned up there, and we'd like to present this to EMDRC, to John.
Here you go.
Take a picture.
Hang on. Here you go.
Give us some lights back on. Get some lights on.
Here you go.
And hopefully the club will use it, get some value out of it, and maybe help some members or others resolve noise issues and send us the successful results.
I guess we'll have this available like the library where people can book it and have it for a week or 2. And I presume there'll be a few members that can help them. Thank you very much.
One of the other things we thought, the idea with the kit was, Ian's idea actually, was instead of going out and buying stuff, not knowing what you need, there's a bunch of stuff in there. If you use some of the ferrites, for example, stuff like that, you can then go and replace them. So there's also a list in there of the JCAR product codes if someone uses stuff and wants to replace it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good on you, Chris and Ian. Thank you very much for that. That's really good. And I'm sure we'll put that to really good use with our membership. Now we've got a few minutes, so if see there, Keith. We'll just see if we can take a few questions, but we'll keep it to a reasonable time, and then we can all have a cup of coffee. And if you want to have a chat later on, that'd be fine. So first question, Jeff.
David, Chris, Ian, thank you very much. Can you enlighten me, what's the duration of the contract term that AMC have got? There's something that's completely escaped my attention, it's just come to me in the course.
I think it's 5 years, but I'm not sure.
Something in that order.
It's either, yeah.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. I'm not sure of the answer to that one, but it's something in that order.
Jamie? Jamie?
Jamie?
I believe it's 5 years.
Oh, that was
that was an answer, not a question. Okay. Leighton?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, your toilet's over there.
Just one question. Anyone have any feedback on how the ACMA feel about dealing with multiple organisations?
We've certainly not had any problems, and I think, you know, we're another representative group, and ACMA deal with representative groups.
Goodness. Okay, Lee.
Given the fact that I've got a minor interest in the USA and the VE program, and the fact that RASA's promoting growth of the hobby, education, reduction of fees, exam fees, etc., what's RASA's view on the program running alongside the AMC exam process?
Don't have any problem with it. I suppose our only view would be, if you're after an Australian licence, do an Australian exam.
It seems that the process at the moment is under review, but it seems to be quite a significant press from RASA through AMC to do that.
No.
No?
I'm not sure how the ACMA are conducting that review. They've just posted on their website that they're conducting a review. We don't know who in the department's doing it or how it's actually being carried out, or for that matter, how long they're going to take. I mean, it leaves us all in the dark, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Didn't even know until someone emailed us the link, Lee, so...
Well, there's been a reduction. There's been a reduction of fees too, isn't there?
I believe there's been a reduction. What is it now? You can have a practical with a theory or something? Yeah. I mean, look, we'd all like to see free exams. Don't think there's any objection there, but it's not the way it works.
Coffee's sounding better all the time.
It sounds like it. Any further questions, or we'll let these gents go and join us for a coffee out the back?
No, I do have one. Okay. With the American license, okay, they're charging much cheaper. Why doesn't Australia follow the same? Why can't the Australian version be much cheaper too?
So it's a question to ask ACMA.
Maybe it's an election issue.
Yeah.
So I'd like to answer that one.
Yeah.
So once you pay for your licence in the US, there is no further charge because they don't pay to speak. They have in their constitution their freedom of speech is enshrined in the constitution, so they don't pay anything.
We have to pay to speak, apparently.
Luke?
Yeah, I've got a comment on that. You don't have to look to the USA for cheap amateur radio license. You only have to look to New Zealand. The New Zealand model is also very, very cheap for the user.
That's true.
Well, I'm a bit jealous of that. I think that it's hard enough as it is bringing people into the hobby, and the fewer obstructions we put in front of prospective amateurs, the better. And the cost of getting into the hobby is a serious one. It's not the only one. I mean, for someone who's prepared to spend a few months studying, maybe the cost isn't the biggest obstruction, but it is an obstruction, and it would be nice to smooth the road for people coming into the hobby. So I would like to see lower cost exams. But the AMC, they cost everything they do. They've been doing that for quite some time, and the cost of that, certainly the way that they've calculated it, from what we can gather, the cost of the exams reflects the cost of what they're charging. I don't know the detail. Sorry?
Yeah, well, if you look at New Zealand, it's all run by volunteers, right? So that's why the cost is low there. There's no excuse. Yeah, there is nobody who needs to pay employees to run things because it's some volunteers.
We've got some geographic issues that are a real problem in Australia compared to the likes of NZ. But
while you're talking about that, don't forget that the Institute have been running at a loss doing the exams for the last few years. It hasn't been a cost recovery basis, they've been running at a loss.
yeah, they did announce that. I think Peter Klee, and Peter's very forthright in what he says. He was at Perth Tech and he spoke on that issue, and he said that it was unfortunate that when he arrived on the scene, that as a director of the WIA, that they had been running at a loss for about the last 8 years, and something like $60,000 had been spent. That's his figures, not ours, but $60,000 had been spent towards annual licences, and that was very difficult for them, and that's not reflected in the new prices.
The other thing people forget about is before the institute was running in teams, they're always done by the department.
Sure.
Bob? Yeah, I just want to make a comment. The reason that I provide some of the resource material for the QRM.Guru thing is because I couldn't find anywhere else where we had a single place that we could go to find information about various things, and some of the stuff that I've been thinking about that you could do for the future is have things like useful URLs. Where do I get stuff? Where do I buy the stuff that I need for my projects that I want, homebrew projects I want to put together, because those resources are not readily available, and a lot of it is hearsay. You go there, find out the bloke's gone out of business or something like that. So if we had an active database of resources, like mini kits and some of those other places. Also, there's also a possibility of they're doing something similar to what's been done with J. Carroll Electronics. In other words, it's got a membership card. You maybe could set up an Australia-wide discount structure for people who want to buy kits. I mean, it's open-ended and it can go a long way if you put your mind to it.
Yep. Okay, well, it's been a great evening and a great presentation from Chris and Ian. Thank you very much for coming along. So if you'd be good enough to put your hands together, we'll thank you.